So, Callie, we just got finished talking about the Las Vegas Aces and the
Yeah.
fact that they are starting to look like themselves again. We're starting to sort of recognize these Aces. So, another big test that will be coming up for them. They did not win their game yesterday versus the Liberty, but it
Mhm.
still sort of feels like they passed that test because
Yeah.
they almost won that game
Mhm.
without Asia Wilson. So now they are going to be facing what many were calling the hottest team in the league since the post Olympic break. That talk may have simmered a little bit after they just lost again to the Minnesota Lynx. So I think the Lynx have to hold the title as the hottest team post Olympics, but the Fever are pretty hot. And yesterday it looked like they were about to lose again. And then they pulled off a comeback, an overtime win.
Mhm.
So the Aces are going to be going in facing a really, really hot team, and I'm just curious, Asia Wilson is going to be coming off of 4 days rest. And she was injured, so I don't want to, make it seem like it was just like rest. She did have an ankle injury, but based on the reporting, you're the reporter, so you can tell me, but based on the reporting, it's not something that the Aces are too concerned about, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You alluded earlier to the way that the Aces do their injury reports and whether or not that's like gamesmanship. I think it's definitely part of like the Popovich tree of like injury reporting. Becky really doesn't want to disclose too much information about these injuries. And so seeing Asia in a boot, that was jarring to me. Like I went into yesterday thinking she's like fine, and then seeing her in the boot I was concerned, but then Becky was like it's completely precautionary. This scans are fine, so I guess we just have to take her word for that. I mean, Asia looked in great spirits. I think that kind of matters when you're trying to like infer things like between what you're hearing and what you're seeing. So she said that they would revisit Asia's availability for this game against the Fever on Wednesday. And to be honest, that's not super comforting for me. I mean, I think that means that she's not ruled out, but that doesn't tell me for sure she'll play, if that makes sense.
Well, of course, because it's not definitive. And I feel like it's one of those things too that's still gamesmanship to me. Like, I don't want y'all to know whether or not we're gonna have Asia, so you
Yeah.
can game plan for it. But I'm banking on Asia being there. I think there's no chance she's missing another game. Even if that means like she's utilized a little differently because she's slightly compromised. But yeah, I don't see them,
You don't see it.
missing
You
that.
don't see them letting her sit one more game.
No, I don't see it because I mean, again, they would still sort of be in the driver's seat if they did that, right? They'd be going in, and if they for some reason lost one of those games, then they'd be tied with Seattle, but they currently own that tiebreaker, I believe. And they still have another game with Seattle. So,
Yeah.
but then you're putting a lot on yourself to like not lose any games and for everything to go perfectly. And while Seattle has been having their struggles, I just don't think you
We
want to
can't
do
like
that.
rule them out. So
Yeah, so I think she plays. I do, and that's what I think is going to happen. So the Fever will be facing the Aces. They have not beaten the Aces all season, but they also look a lot better than
yeah.
they have all year and when
Oh,
they
yeah.
face the Aces. So I guess it depends on how you look at it. Do you still consider the Aces one of the upper echelon teams? Because they've beaten all the upper echelon teams except the Aces, though I do put an asterisk on the Lynx because the one game that they did beat the Lynx, Nafisa Collar didn't play. In every
Right.
game Nafisa played, they have not. So, they've beaten, if you consider the Sun one of those teams, and I would, but I think we talked before and you mentioned the Mercury, and I told you I like the wins against the Mercury were not that big of a deal to me because as we can see, the Mercury are not that great of a
I mean, I
team.
think that's a take that aged well. I think that's a take that aged well.
So, so it's just like, but they have had good wins. They've beaten Seattle, but again, Seattle's also last week in my power rankings, I took Seattle out of the contender group. They need to show me some more for me to group them with the contenders. And my contenders are the Lynx, the Liberty, the Aces, and the Sun. And I do have the Lynx and Liberty slightly higher though than just because they've just been consistent all season. So that's how I'm looking at it. I feel like those are the real contender teams. A lot of people think that Indiana, they're so hot right now that they should be up there with those teams. So do you agree with that? And what do you think about the Aces going into this matchup?
Okay, so I think with the Fever, I was impressed by that. I think the Atlanta Dream, they had all the motivation to win that game, right? Like their playoff spot was on the line. They were trying to get that eighth and final spot. And so to see the Fever perform the way they did, it's like you have 26 points and 12 assists from Caitlin Clark, then a career high 30 points and 13 rebounds from Aaliyah Boston. That makes me a little nervous, especially against someone like Ryan Howard, who had 36 points to try to bolster the Dream to the postseason. Like that was a game with stakes and they looked good. The Fever did, like when it kind of mattered. So I think that that's, respect to the Fever. I think as it pertains to the Aces, you would really, really, really want A'ja Wilson to be back for these next two games against the Fever. And I know we just talked about kind of like whether or not that'll happen. But I think when you have Aaliyah Boston like performing at all cylinders right now, like you need someone like A'ja in the paint because the Aces don't have that. Like they signed Queen Egbo because they felt like they needed another big, but they haven't really utilized her. And her 7-day contract would technically end today. You know what I'm saying? I don't know what their plan is, but like she got 1 minute of playtime against the Liberty and was a net 0. And they didn't get to see anything from her. And so then you have Megan Gustafson and Kia Stokes, and Megan has had some great minutes for the Aces. It's just like not consistent in what she's been able to contribute. But like for her to be a big that can score from the perimeter, that's great when it's working. But I think, I'm not alone in my assessment that they need better depth in the paint. If you know what I mean? Like I don't think that I'm the only person who thinks that. So I think that going against Aaliyah Boston, you want somebody in the paint that can handle business. And so that would be like my main concern at this point.
Yeah. I think agreed that you want A'ja because Aaliyah's not winning that matchup versus her. But Aaliyah, we do have to shout out her game yesterday, a 30-point double-double. Tremendous game from her. 13 rebounds, 5 assists. She talks about, because actually, Aaliyah has been playing very well now for a while, but it's kind of been all about, obviously it's always about Caitlin Clark and it's been about Kelsey Mitchell, but late, Aaliyah showed out, and it's just a reminder that they really have a 3-headed monster over there. So she says here, I just tell myself to dominate. That's really my mindset, no matter who I'm playing. And she did dominate yesterday. Atlanta had control of that game. It's another reason why I question the Dream. Not only did the Fever bounce back from a loss that they had to the Lynx, but they bounced back within that game, right? Like the Fever had that game won. They had that game won. And I think what's so notable about, not the Fever, the Dream had that game won. And I think what's so notable about the Fever is, and you see this with them in all their games, they do not give up when they're down, right? And I think that's one of the biggest signs of maturity you've seen with them over the course of this season. So they're never really out of it, and they can come back on you. So the Aces are going to definitely have a challenge going into that game, and we talked about double doubles, but like Caitlin Clark, she even, she now has the most double doubles, for, I believe it's for Fever, in franchise history. So look at that. And she's a guard. Yeah. Right? Like that's incredible. So they, Caitlin started off slow yesterday, and then she finished with an incredible game, which is not like surprising from her, but it's just they have a lot of weapons. They had multiple players double digits yesterday, 20-point scorers. Kelsey Mitchell, Aaliyah Boston, Caitlin Clark, and then Lexi chipped in with 12 points, and we talked about Lexi Hull last week and her impact lately. So they're definitely still a dangerous team. They're a dangerous team to play. And I think if you're the Aces, you just, to me, it's not so much about can the Aces beat the Fever. I don't even think the Aces and the Fever are going to match up in the postseason, right? It's more to me a litmus test of they're playing really well right now. People are looking at them like post Olympics as one of the best teams. Can you go in there and have a convincing win the way you've had over them all season?
Yeah. I just want to add, because you mentioned the double-double as a guard. So she actually has the most rebounds by a rookie guard in a season ever, like in WNBA history. She has 204 right now with 5 games left. So I think that's something to watch. And then you also alluded to the Fever and their ability to keep fighting, right? At like no matter what point, like bounce back from a loss, bounce back in a game. And Aaliyah Boston gave us a good quote. I know you read one previously, but if I can, I just want to add one because I thought this was so good. I'm going to read it from my phone. She said, right now, we're kind of in the space where we just have to make sure we're keeping our foot on the gas. I think that we know that we're very capable of beating any single team just because of the way that we play, the pace that we play at, and the weapons that we have all around the floor. Even if we're down, no matter what the time of the game is, we're very capable of coming back. And what's so funny is Sue Bird on her podcast recently said that if she were still playing, the Fever are a team that she would not want to see in the postseason because of the pace. Like she said that, pace beats physicality, pace beats a lot of things, but the Fever play at a fast pace. So that's something as well. I mentioned Aaliyah Boston being somebody you want to have an answer for, but also just this mindset. And then what Aaliyah alluded to, that pace.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I think that's really the way, you don't want to play at the Fever's pace. There are definitely some teams that can hang with them, but you don't want to play at their pace. And Caitlin Clark is so great at controlling tempo and controlling the pace. And so she's pushing it up the floor every time in transition, just fast buckets, fast buckets, fast buckets. Kelsey Mitchell can run, she's fast. So, her bigs are running the floor. So they want to play very fast. And so that's very annoying. But in a series, in the postseason, that is when you get to muck up the game a little bit and slow it down. And that to me is, the question of, are they going to be able to handle it? And you could see that with the Lynx. They were getting frustrated. The Lynx are a very tough defense and they were mucking it up. And they weren't getting calls, and you saw the frustration sort of seep in with them. There's just going to be more of that physicality in the postseason. That's not just WNBA basketball. That's just postseason basketball. Happens in the NBA, happens in the WNBA, and so definitely slowing their pace down is definitely something they're going to need to do. And you can imagine someone like Jackie is going to have a tough task in those 2 games, most likely getting a lot of minutes on Caitlin. So, which also impacts your offense. And so I'll be really interested to see, how Jackie shows up in that game. But I don't think, even though the Aces can play fast, I don't think right now they want to get into a pace game with the Fever.
They do not.
Well, looking forward to that matchup. It will be a good one. A lot of eyes are going to be on that game because people are like, we want, from the Indiana side, they're like, we want to see how they do against the Aces, because this is what comes with being 2-time champions and back-to-back champs, that it doesn't matter what your record is. It doesn't matter if you've been struggling. People still have the Aces are in town. They are the defending champs. We want to beat them. We want to show up against them. And knowing Indy has not gotten a win against them, and it's going to be a mini series. They're going to see each other twice, but a good result for Indiana. Obviously, they'll want to win both games. The Aces will want to win both games. I think a good result probably for both teams is splitting, but obviously both teams will want to win both games. So it's going to be a good one, I hope, I think. And I'm looking forward to it. That game on Wednesday. So y'all tune in. Callie will be tuned in because she'll be covering it. And I'm always tuned in as well to cover the W. So thanks for tuning in with us today. We appreciate y'all. And we will be back next week. Thank you, Callie, Lawson, Freeman.
Thank you.